Thanks for joining us. This is Monday, March 7th, 2022, and a call to order for our special meeting of the Aspen City Council. Could we have a roll call for attendance, please?
Councillor Doyle.
Here.
Councillor Howenstein.
Present.
Councillor Mesereau.
Present.
Councillor Richards. Mayor Tory.
And here. Our agenda item today is really city manager review. We have had an extensive process, and just so for viewing public, we had a third-party consultant conduct some feedback interviews with council members, also got some staff feedback, as well as Sarah Ott provided a self-evaluation review. And then we have been working on preparing a review letter that puts into an official statement of items such as strengths, items to development opportunities, and of course goals and objectives for upcoming year. We've had a meeting with Sarah, and this is an opportunity for us to follow up and finish some of that work in a public forum. At Sarah's request. So with that, the one area, and Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you in a moment, and the one area that I walked away from our last meeting knowing was that we needed to rework goals and expectations in order to really make them, I hate to say just achievable, but make them realistic and achievable. So I did put that into language and shared that with council members, as well as Sarah has a copy as well. So those are rewritten, and we'll get her input on how those line up and if she needs anything more in that area from us. But with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Sarah. Sarah wanted to have a couple of items in conversation in a public forum, so we are here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for the record, to reflect that I have requested this to be a public meeting rather than an executive session in line with, I forget which provision it is of my employment agreement, but somewhere in there it says it's the city manager's choice. I requested that the evaluation occur in a public setting. I think it's a valuable transparency exercise for members of my team, and also has led to me having some great conversations about vulnerability with them, and sometimes you need to be vulnerable. So I'm open to discuss any portions of the review that you would like. Some of the pieces that I particularly am looking for clarity on are around the comments on council consensus agreement and alignment efforts, the comments on council relationships, the comments on clarifying roles and responsibilities of the council and city manager, and the comments on carrying out council directives and implementation of council policies. Of course, if there's anything else in the review you'd like to discuss, that's fine. I also received, just as we were starting, a printout from Mayor Tory regarding goals for the next upcoming area. I glanced at them. I haven't actually, processed them at all. But I will take a look at that if we take a break. Thank you.
All right. What I'm referring to, for the viewing public, what I'm referring to is an annual performance review letter that was prepared for us, taking council input, staff feedback, and it identifies notable accomplishments of the previous year, areas of excellence. It's important, I think, for everybody to know that this council highly values Sarah Ott's service. We see some of her greatest strengths as her financial management, fiscal responsibility in her role. We have valued her ability to build external relationships and intergovernmental relationships. We appreciate her leadership and personnel management. We also appreciate the work that she's done on council prioritization of goals and pursuing those goals and the work that we've gotten done this year. I think all of us agree that where we are with housing, childcare, and our environmental objectives are further ahead than we were a year ago, in largest part to Sarah's work. We also identified some areas for development. Number one being communication, improving communication with council members and amongst council members. This is such a fundamental and important point for us. Communication of how we work together is really the essence of what we do at the table. So really still working on that. That's a carryover goal as we continue to improve our communication as well as city communications. Sarah's talking about some areas that we wanted to talk about was council consensus, agreement, and alignment efforts. With that, Sarah, your questions in this area?
Mr. Mayor, I didn't prepare specific questions. This was an area the city council has not spoken with me about, and so I'm looking for the consensus council comments on this. Thank you.
We are looking for you to continue to guide the council in discussions using active listening, reflective listening, and summarizing skills. Looking for commonality and weaving together the information that you hear from council. We understand that it is majority decision-making. We often try to get to even greater than just a majority and move towards consensus, greater consensus. We also are hoping that in that pursuit that you're able to listen to the input from individual council members and weave that into your considerations as you move forward with direction. We are looking for the opportunity to have discussions that are met with either looking for opportunities to be successful with the requests that we may make and looking for responses that sound something like, here are my challenges, these are the tools that I would need to make this successful, and really informing us about how we can empower you to do your job as the best that you can in a really great positive working environment. Are there any questions around that as an ideal?
My request would be that the council focus on how it concludes its discussions and that there is a check-in amongst the council on what their direction is they believe they're giving to staff. And that will leave less up to my interpretation and more clarity on the council's intent for myself and staff to be successful.
Thank you. Next section that you wanted discussed?
There were comments about council relationships, and so I need to further understand those comments.
This council has been working on working agreements and protocols, still trying to refine how we agree that you want to get and receive information direction. So we've been asking of your help in defining and refining those processes. We agree with one of the goals that you had in your self-evaluation about creating and updating working agreements, the decision-making process, as well as some rules and regulations around council. Some of that information does exist, but we have a feeling that we could make that better in order to clearly communicate the direction that we're asking from you. In that, we are also asking for some of your expertise and some of the council onboarding and training, and so that way that new council members can get the benefit of some processes in place. I'm going to allow other council members to speak to this if they'd like to.
Yeah, I feel that it's self-governance is, I think it's a responsibility for the city council to come up with some of these working agreements and understandings, and that I don't really feel that it's a city manager. I draw a line between what city manager should be implementing the policy decisions that this council makes, and I don't think the city manager should be in really defining what the relationship between the council members is. So I think that it's our responsibility as a council to come to an agreement that would cover our agreements amongst ourselves, how we deal with city staff, what's expected of each other, how we communicate with our constituents through keeping each other abreast of how the emails are going back and forth. The areas that Sarah asked to be as a public discussion, I feel they will greatly benefit not only Sarah, but the city council, and I think I feel that it is really our responsibility to come up with those, I've been calling them code of conduct or rules of engagement, just an understanding that we can all have and carry forward for this council and future councils, and it can be refined. But one of my concerns is that the city manager really, her or his role is to implement policy and not really direct the council. So I think it's our responsibility to clarify what our positions are, how we relate to each other, what our relationships are with not only Sarah, but with other staff, city staff. And so these areas that Sarah brought up that she wanted to have a public discussion and that were identified for her involvement. I personally feel that this is the responsibility, our joint responsibility as a city council to work on. We have some drafts running around to work on this, and the relationships, communications. Communications are always a difficult thing. How we relate to each other, how we get information from Sarah, how we give information to staff. But I'll just sum it up by saying I think all of these areas about council should be resolved by us, and that would help Sarah have a clear idea. But I don't personally feel that the city manager should be directing council on these areas.
Agreed.
I agree with what Ward said. Being a part of this review was not easy. I stated this during the review, I've been here the least amount of time and I'm learning a lot, but I think this city actually runs like a well-oiled machine. And I think a lot of that is due to Sarah's leadership, especially over the last 2 years. So that's what I'll end with.
Thanks, John. Any additional comments
Specifically on this point, they all bleed together a little bit, so,
on just that?
on the working agreements piece?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we have room for improvement. I would agree with Ward that is a council-led discussion, and I think that we're asking for Sarah's partnership in refining and sort of, codifying that. We could sit together and say, for instance, we'd like our agreement to be that we all just come up ideas on our own and send them off to Sarah and let her sort that out. We'll probably want her to say to us, well, that's probably not going to be a very effective way to do that for my office and for the city. So I think, it is up to us to sort of draft those and work with each other, but we're looking for Sarah's partnership in refining those, sort of running them through her institutional knowledge of how city government functions, and ultimately coming to agreements that we all, agree to, redundant word, but then also upholding those. I think what we don't want to do is sort of, the example that keeps popping up for me is like Enron had great verbiage on their website of corporate responsibility, but what was happening was not exactly corporately responsible. And so we don't want these to be rules in name only. We want to agree to things that we really want to institutionalize, to practice, to follow. That's going to take some time to develop new behaviors. And so, so I view Sarah also as a partner in that. we're the leader, but, she's also there to help remind us and bring us back as necessary.
Thank you. Sarah, any questions, comments?
Has the council thought about how they want to do this work?
Yeah, we've started drafting some working agreements. We want to get through those and get to a place that we all feel that the information's included, and then we'd like to bring you into the conversation and give us some of your expertise and fill in the gaps of the things that we don't know.
I feel that we could really benefit from a facilitator working with the council, a good facilitator to help us define these areas with their institutional knowledge, somebody that's really specializes in this in personal relationships. Then we can, I don't know how much we have to collaborate with Sarah, what kind of involvement she wants in this, but I think that we could really benefit from having a professional facilitator.
I don't feel the same on that. I think that a lot of the ground rules, regulations are out there. I think it's about putting them in front of us and following them. I think that from this side of the table, we can work on our working agreements, and with Sarah's help, to get process in line so that, we move as a team. I think we can achieve those goals. I'm happy to, consider a facilitator. But my initial reaction is I think the material is there for us.
Well, there are some drafts going back and forth. Do you think it would be beneficial to have a work session where we can hash this out in person, or are we doing refinements of drafts, exchanging, or what process do you think is
I think
best?
we should refine our drafts, get Sarah's consultation on it, and then if we want to schedule a work session for it and finish it off, if it's something that's not quite finished and we need a work session on it, but hopefully we'll get to a place where all 5 members can sign off on it. And that's my hope.
Yeah, and my initial reaction to that is that transparency might be best served by public meeting.
I mean, if we're going to be creating a working agreement document, that can always be shared with the public. But to do that in a work session, I think is going to take so much wordsmithing over a table. I'd like to get some work done on it before that. But if council wants to bring it to a work session, absolutely.
Just to comment, because I have no issue with a facilitator. I'm not against that, but I do think we have if we have enough trust in ourselves to know what's right, I think we can get something rolling, and I think we can be smart about setting some metrics of what success may look like, and doing check-ins with ourselves, and that may be something non-quantifiable, like I feel more comfortable or I feel more heard at the council table on a regular basis, and it may be a more quantifiable thing, but we could set like a 3-month check-in, for instance, and say, hey, are we making progress? And if we're not, then we can think about bringing in a facilitator. And I will say this, I'm certainly not closed to any facilitator, no matter where they come from, but my intuition would say if we do need a facilitator, we should not find one from inside the government sphere. We should figure out what other sphere out there feels and acts the way we want to feel and act, because if there is one place that has probably the least functional, on average, relationships and processes, I think it's government, and so I think we could probably benefit from what others are doing.
Could you wrap this back into what is my role as your city manager? Thank you.
Maybe I can address that with my answer. I agree with Tori. I think I've seen a couple drafts of what we're working on, and to me, it seems like we're pretty close. I think we can tweak it here and there between the 5 of us, working, 2 at a time. And once we get something we all like, we'll present it to Sarah, get her weigh in on it, and make some more tweaks if she feels that's necessary. But I do feel we're on the right track. And I don't think we have a long way to go.
So answer your question, Sarah, how do we roll this in with you? What do you want? What kind of involvement do you think you need to be in this process?
Well, that's certainly to be defined by the council. My experience in doing this with other governing boards is much more partnership rather than review. And that, let's see, board made a request that fit within the 2 hours. I pulled together examples from 10 to 15 other communities I already had on file. I do think that there needs to be not just a conversation about, as you're looking at, as the conduct of council members, but the role clarity between the city manager, city attorney's office, and the mayor pro tem roles, and the council member roles collectively. That would certainly be setting the organization up for its best success. I think some of the examples I provided who've done this included Estes Park, Eagle County has a pretty well-tailored document. And there's others out there. My suggestion to you is that I would be surprised if you can complete all of this through a code of conduct. You need to update your 2005 rules and regulations that were adopted by resolution, most likely. So there'll have to be some public process involved with that update as well. That particular document from 2005 has some expectations of the city manager in it that I would like to discuss that I've been carrying out, but I don't know that those are necessarily appropriate for the city manager to have those duties.
I would think the more partnership, the better. Certainly the better result. But what does that word mean to you in this circumstance?
That there would be a joint identification of current issues, agreement on which of those issues would be addressed, and going through a process to identify those improvements and getting them documented and memorialized by the council.
That makes perfect sense to me. I'd like to see Eagle County's council's code of conduct.
The other thing I would encourage all the council members to read, and I gave my one booklet I have away to Ward right now. I don't know, it's on loan from my personal library, but it's by the work of a gentleman named John Carver, who specializes in this area of the policy governance model. And I've used his work in a number of places successfully with other councils, and it really has helped governing bodies focus on the policy and less on the administrative. Every community finds its sort of sweet spot between those two and recognizes it's not the same for every policy issue, but it creates some common language and understanding going forward that might be of benefit to the council. So if you're interested, I can order more copies if each of you would like to see it. I don't know, it's like 30 pages. I've got the full book in my office, but it's like 400. So I don't know if any of you have an interest in the longer version, but I have it right now as well.
Just to share with the rest of the council, I did ask Sarah for some other agreements between other municipalities and some background information. She sent me an email, I think, with 11 attachments. I'll make sure that everybody gets those with your permission, Sarah. I think it's fine that we all have Eagle and Fort Collins and other areas that have working agreements that seem to work well.
I definitely want to see that, and if we're seriously considering modeling any of those, I would want to look past the written document and talk to the people participating in those systems and see how it's actually working. And so, maybe we do that as a group or whatever, but, how does it feel at the council table? How are you moving things forward or not? What are your relationships with your colleagues or manager feel like? What other changes would you make? I'd want to ask a lot of those questions.
Sounds good. So, we're talking about updating Resolution 51, Series 2005. We're talking about working agreements amongst council members, and we're talking about using other examples, as well as Sarah as an expert in this. So, in the goals and expectations, I included this as a goal, is that this year we will continue to work on council working agreements, decision-making process, rules and regulations. So I'd like to see this process unfold. Like I said, I think we have work to do. We all need to inform ourselves a little bit before we call the work session to work it out at the table, and we'll get to that this year.
So I have clarity on my next step. What do you want me to do next besides forwarding you all the information I provided Ward?
That's the next step.
Then wait patiently.
All right. Thank you, John. I just want to make sure it was clear, then I just wait, or whether I was supposed to be doing something.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm guessing, but that seems like.
Yeah, we have some work that we need to do before we can come back to you on it.
Yeah, and I guess, Tori, I guess it's kind of a request for you, but also to all of us, myself included, is just, I would hate to be back here in a year without this completed. And when I say completed, I realize that this work will always continue as human beings. We'll always keep improving in this. But I'd really like to see us, sort of codify the first draft, put it into action, and be looking at, results and deliverables from that, over the coming months. And so however we put a timeline and a review process around that just for ourselves. Doesn't have to be fancy or elaborate, but to keep it moving.
This will help me with the other example provided in here was better council onboarding and training. The council clarifying some of its operating procedures will absolutely help me onboard better. John got a big stack of stuff for me because he's a reader and he likes to read it and come back and ask questions. That worked for him. And we had a lot of conversations. I don't know, we probably met at least for 12 weeks in the beginning to help with that transition on. And I know you spent time with him too, to go over a lot of things he needed to know procedurally. In this area, one thing I had some confusion about is there's some conversation about technical training on managing social media accounts. And I just needed to understand what was being asked for there, since it's staff who manages all of the city's social media. And so I didn't understand this comment and need some clarification on it.
I think that it really feeds into council working agreements and communication. That was, again, one of the issues that I think we're having with this review letter is that it was not really identifying consensus points. And that some of these were very specific comments by individuals and not by the group. So I think that comment is, just asking for working agreements about protocol, about how we use social media and how we don't.
Thank you. I have delayed scheduling CIRSA to come in for training because of the amount of time needed on the work session calendar for moratorium work. But CIRSA does specific elected official training around social media liability that I think this group would benefit from pretty substantially, from understanding sort of how to navigate that space and some of the expectations of privacy that don't exist in that space as an elected official. As well as there's just a lot of other good information that Sam has in his trainings. I don't know. Do you have anything to say about Sam's trainings?
About the which?
Sam's trainings at CIRSA.
It can be very helpful.
And this is definitely an area that it crosses over with Jim, in his role. So that'd be appreciated. John?
I just want to say really quick, I'd appreciate knowing more, but in my small sphere of influence, if I think there's a question about something I may or may not post, I usually say, if I have a question, I'm not going to post it. And that seems to have kept me out of trouble so far.
Be my advisor.
I'm here for you, buddy.
If there's other areas, or John, if you offline have specific feedback about your training experience, that would be your onboarding experience, that would be helpful to hear.
I thought the onboarding experience was really good. I feel like I got a pretty quick education in how our city works in a very short period of time. And I look forward to touring more of the departments and learning more about what makes this city work and the amazing jobs our staff does.
And thank you. The other item in here was clarification on how to understand the role of staff and staff support that is provided to the council would be helpful. This is a piece that should be addressed in the council's documentation to an extent. So currently, your documentation that I need to follow says if the request is under 2 hours worth of staff time, we can do it. If it's more than 2 hours, I need to have multiple of you, at least a majority of you, support that. And so if there's additional clarification that's needed, more than that point from your rules, then just let me know, because that should get added to the list of things that need sorted out.
I don't think there's a question about that. You know, I think, I think that council members have been trying to use staff as a resource in answering questions, and maybe there's been some times where, as you shared with us, that you know, it's difficult for staff to have direct conversations with individual council members because there's the likelihood that they'll take it as direction or feel the pressure to answer yes. So I think that's an area that what you just outlined about the 2-hour rule, if you will, really clarifies a little bit. The other thing is that, you know, you want to be informed and copied in so that you know what interactions are happening, what staff is responding, and how it's impacting their workload, their work plan, and how they're going about their stuff. So I think with those things that you've clarified for us, that we've made headway in that area. I think we're all clearer about engaging staff and utilizing them appropriately. Another area for discussion this evening, Sarah?
There was clarifying roles and responsibilities of the council and the city manager.
Again, this is uses an example that was very specific. I think the work that we will be doing with working agreements and roles and responsibilities is some of the information that you're going to be bringing to us and sharing with us from other communities will probably help in that.
Okay. And then the other one, carrying out council's directives and implementation of council policies. Was listed as a developmental area.
Yeah, you know, this one really alluded to our interactions with staff and the recommendations that we receive. Wanting to know that balance, find that balance, or feel that balance. And again, I think this is maybe a feeling of perhaps some council members. The last year's stated goal of providing alternatives and options is something that has been a great help in this area, and our desire to see that continued is really what's stated here and the feeling on council. The second bullet underneath this is about the communication with the reasonings of why. You know, I could give you the one example that's fresh for me is a couple meetings ago, we were looking at the pedestrian improvement over on the intersection by City Market, and I just had one question for engineering about the timing of it, the why, as it says here, the why we were doing what we were doing. And I think that that's really council's request here, is that we continue to get the alternatives and options for consideration, stated pros and cons for those positions, and more of the background of the why that we're getting from staff.
So staff can provide the why behind its recommendations, but I would encourage the council members to think about the why of the policy is actually what you state in conjunction with your vote. And that is a separation of responsibilities that perhaps isn't as clear in some of these conversations. So we'll always articulate the rationale for our recommendation to you, and if we're not doing a good job, please let me know and we'll work on it. But I can't, I need you to make comments on the record as to your whys in order to accomplish this.
Understood. Understood. Does that make sense,
Does.
council?
Yes.
Thank you. Was that the last section?
If there's anything else in the review the council wants to talk about, I'm more than happy to talk about any of them.
I just wanted to talk a little bit about the goals and expectations. I took an opportunity to rewrite them, clean them up a little bit. At our last meeting with you, some of the goals that you stated in your self-evaluation, we left that meeting with your request to look at that list, refine that list, maybe knock some things off that list. I kind of reworded them in a little bit. I want to share with you Rachel's comments. Rachel couldn't be here tonight, but Rachel's input on this is that it's about progress. Your list of goals is about progress. Her expectation is not necessarily completion of some of the items that were listed, but in the remaining months of this review year, but that there is continued progress and that we're working on those. And you'll see kind of that language reflected in how I rewrote some of the goals and expectations. I feel like I pared these down to be a lot more precise and clear, but at the same time with the understanding that our ask of you and our expectation is to be working on these items. Some of the items that you identified in your self-evaluation were like pedestrian mall reconstruction. And we didn't think that was something to say that should be completed in this review year.
Thank you. Certainly wouldn't be.
And understood that. So, as I put the word planning on the end of that, as well, the Aspen Housing Summit and plan, completing that, wrapping that housing summit and the plan that's being worked on now is just about getting that to a place. It wasn't about accomplishing what's in the plan, but just getting it done. The one that does here, again, lumberyard entitlements near substantial completion, I think was your wording. The utility infrastructure replacement strategy. We want to hear from you what planning you're thinking of. How would we be implementing that? The one that is in here that I think carried over directly from your words is the staff retention and attraction through classification and compensation study implementation. So I think that we do have a goal and expectation that your classification and compensation study will be completed and that you will start implementing some of the findings that you've got there. So that's really the only one that we've identified as maybe that is completed within this review year. The others are to continue to work on council working agreements and the like, to continue to work on and improve the communications with council. And then there's one additional with goals and expectations that wasn't on the list originally, but our feeling was that we wanted you to develop a process. And again, giving you the latitude and the opportunity to develop a process for council members to be more informed on organization staff successes and challenges. And that really came about because as part of our charge is to make sure that that is being done as part of your responsibilities in how our organization is being led. And we just feel like we don't have enough information about it. So I've included in here, and number 3 is to develop a process for us to be able to share that information with you. In the meeting that we had, I believe that this topic came up, and we're just interested in learning about what's going on, some of the challenges that you're facing as well as staff members and that kind of thing, but also the successes. So that's a little overview of the goals and expectations. Again, I focused on not adding anything that wasn't agreed on by council members, and then just giving a different wording to it so that it was realistic and achievable.
I'd like to comment on something the mayor just mentioned, and that's you've acted as a good firewall between us and staff, such a good firewall that we don't really have a feel for what the mood and the stress level and everything of staff is, and I think I would like to be able to know if we've overburdened staff, if you're protecting us from knowing that. I want to know how much can we lay on staff, how much what we're asking to do is putting stress and challenges to staff. So just a better feel for us to know what the mood and environment of staff is.
So I won't look at any of them, but all of well, okay, I'll look at you all at once. So last week with directors, I hold quarterly small group meetings, which are usually 5 or so directors with me, and we just talk about just about anything that they want to talk about. And we did this past one, we did an exercise called Fasten Your Seatbelts. And so Fasten Your Seatbelts is an exercise where I ask them at whatever level they're comfortable sharing with their peers and me what their turbulence level is. And it could be from home, it could be from work, or a combination of the two. And they choose the number, and then some of them want to explain what their number is. So, I went first as an example, and I had 3 things that were making my turbulence level one of the highest turbulence levels it could be for me. Fortunately, I never hit 10, which means you're ready to quit. What I can tell you, based on your comments right there, is that the turbulence is very high, and it's not because people are dissatisfied or don't want to be here, but it's the pace at which work is needing to occur compared to the staffing resources available to accomplish it. The effects of the labor market. And it is burning staff out. And trying to find a better balance for everyone, I think, needs to be a focus this year. Or our successes we'll gain from the class and comp study will be lost.
Thank you for that.
I really appreciate that example. I feel like we get little glimpses from time to time of sort of practices inside, and they always make me feel really good about the relationship dynamics and the sort of the team building that happens there. And I think in our letter, in our goal statement, there's some soft and there's some hard results that we're looking for. They're both really important, but at least in my experience, the soft ones are always the precedent to achieving the hard ones, because if the people don't work together well, then they tend to produce less good results. And so, I think, we've used the words a lot in here, sort of tone, tenor, style, and we've talked about some opportunities for improvement on sort of this end, if staff is here and you're here and council's here on our end, in our relationships, not just together, but also one-to-one between you and each of us. And so I think, when I kind of think about the specifics around those goal statements, I would hope that by the end of this year, and you're working one-to-one with each of us, and then collectively in this group, that each of us has a better sense of our mutual turbulence, of our life experience, that we have a better sense of trust and camaraderie, and just that we got each other's back. And so, I don't know exactly how we quantify that on a one-to-one basis, but I would hope that each of us, from the work we've done with you, Sarah, feels that we've made substantial improvements in our individual relationships and in our group relationships, and that is significantly empowering those harder goals getting done.
We sit here and we might be with the department for an hour, and what we request might take hundreds of hours of staff time. Yeah. So I personally want to know when we're asking too much.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how we get that feedback. I know that staff doesn't want to say, well, we can't do that. You know, it's just too much, we just can't do it. So we really need to know somehow when we're, Adam Frisch used to say, well, we can do that, what don't you want that we can take off the table so we can do that? And that's the type of feedback that I'd like to get. For us to sit here and do a 4-hour meeting and create 500 hours worth of staff work, we go home and they go to work. So, you know, quality of life is important, and I don't want to be overburdening our staff so that they're not enjoying their lives.
Yeah, I think we all feel that way.
I appreciate the comments from Sarah because, and it makes perfect sense. Of course, staff is burning out. We have burdened them with a lot of work, and we are understaffed. So I'm glad we've worked on the compensation program because that's seems to be where we need to go next, is getting our staffing levels back up, making sure they have a place to live, and then giving them some work to do. First things first.
And thank you for recognizing that housing for staff is a challenge. Just like every other employer here in the Upper Valley, it's very difficult to compete against the middle and lower valley right now for workers. And particularly jobs that are maybe don't necessitate needing a special skill, but are nevertheless really important jobs to making our community run. Or jobs that we're able to train people into, but why do they want to sit from the airport to the roundabout every morning to get here? And there's a really fair quality of life questions for them to ask for themselves and their families that we need to resolve to the best of our abilities.
Sarah, it sounds to me like I could do a little work on this letter. I mean, obviously, the goals and objectives section, I think, needs to be swapped out, changed out. But maybe there's some other cleanup on language. Is that something that you could see as being beneficial? I mean, it's necessary, number one, because I don't think we all want to sign what we have here.
Well, it'd be great if it would be something you could all sign, would be my first request. Yes, I've kept some notes through the conversation of some things that might be beneficial to be reviewed again.
Okay.
And a decision made whether they're worded appropriately to provide clarity or if they should be removed.
So could you and I have a brief meeting sometime about some of that language, and then I'll take it upon myself to clean this document up, and we'll get something that we can all accept? Great.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments, questions for Sarah at this time? We're going to go into an executive session in a moment. We need some conference about some personnel questions, so. Anything else? Sarah?
Nothing further from me. Thank you.
Oh, I do have one thing.
You're so good at that, Skippy.
No, I really appreciate doing at least part of this publicly. I think it is, like you said, a great example of leadership, of vulnerability, and I just want to applaud you for making that choice. I think it's great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. All right. The beat goes on with this one. We'll be back to you with it.
Mr. Mayor, it's my understanding that council wishes to go into executive session pursuant to 246424E, determining positions relative matters that are subject to negotiations. 4F, personnel. I would add 4B, conference with the attorney. The specific items of discussion in executive session involves the city manager's review and contract negotiations regarding the city manager. If council votes to go into executive session will be recorded, and the recording will be maintained by the clerk for a period of not less than 90 days.
I know, right? I know. Do we have a motion?
I move that we go into executive session.
I'll
for the
second.
reasons cited by our city attorney.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, could we have a roll call vote for going into executive session, please?
Counselor Doyle,
Yes.
Counselor Howenstein,
Yes.
Counselor Mesereau,
See,
Counselor Richards, oh, sorry, Mayor Tory.
Yes. And for the record, we will have to come back out of executive session to adjourn the special meeting, but we will not be conducting any business at that time, all outside of concluding the meeting and adjournment.
So we will adjourn to downstairs for the executive session. And as you said, we will not come back up here because you're not intending to take any action.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
You ever watch old TV
Thanks, Grassroots.
Columbo?
Thanks for rebooting.
Oh, you should find.